Okay, the next thing we're going to be going over is entering pasture and animal profiles into NUTBAL. Pastures. Pastures and animal profiles are specific to each ranch and are reusable. These do not have to be entered each time you collect a sample. So if you're creating an account for the first time, or maybe you've been using us for a couple of years and you've created pastures or animal profiles, once again, these don't have to be entered each time. They are reusable, so that kind of comes in handy if you're sampling the same herd or sampling from the same pasture, over the course of a couple of years or months, or however you set up your sampling schedule. Okay, back kind of, on our home screen here, we're now going to be working from the Properties tab at the top, and you'll see underneath that little Properties tab is the Pastures drop down that appears. So you'll click on the Pastures tab, and this is the page that it's going to take you to. So if you're creating a pasture for the first time, you'll see the red circled area there. You'll select New Pasture. Once you select New Pasture, you will click on the Google map here in the approximate area of where your pasture is located, and you'll notice that this green icon appears. For each pasture, you'll have a different green icon, just kind of a future deal. So once you drop your green icon in the approximate area of where your pasture is located, you'll come down here to this information, pertaining to that pasture. So you'll enter the pasture name. That can just be whatever it is that you call it. If you don't have a pasture name, you could just, use kind of a generic term like pasture 1 or something of that nature. The description box is just if you have any kind of notes regarding that pasture. Maybe, that pasture has been in drought-like conditions for a while, or maybe you've had really heavy rainfall, or maybe you've got a cover crop planted or something of that nature, and you want to tell us what you've got there in that cover crop. You can use that description box just to kind of give us a brief little description or note about this pasture. There is a character limit, though, in that description box, so you'll have to keep it kind of short, but if you want to leave us a little note just so we can get a better understanding and idea of what that pasture is looking like, or the weather conditions or whatever for that pasture, the forage quality for that pasture, you can tell us in that box. The box below that is the size of grazable area. This is just going to be the acres of your pasture. And then below that is the harvest use efficiency. So this box, you'll see the 60% will default in there, but this is essentially just the amount of forage you plan on allowing your animals to graze or remove from the pasture. So if you have a different number in there than the 60%, feel free to adjust that as necessary as it meets your operation. The next drop down here we have is vegetation cover. So this allows you to kind of select which vegetation cover most closely applies to your pasture, whether it's an improved pasture or if it's native grasses. Depending on what region of the United States you're in, you could be in the tall, intermediate, or short. And then you also have annual grain there. So if whichever one most closely resembles that pasture is the one that you're going to select. And then our last drop down here you'll see is the activity and terrain drop down. This here is just kind of gives us an idea of what the activity looks like in this pasture, as well as the terrain. So most commonly you'll see the second and third one down from the top are the adequately watered pasture less than or equal to 15% slope, and then the third one down from the top is the adequately watered pasture greater than 15% slope. Those are the most common ones we use. However, if your pasture does not fall into those categories, that's perfectly okay. You're just going to select the one that more closely relates to it. For example, if you are in drought-like conditions and haven't had rain for a while, you could use the poorly watered pasture, and then whatever the rate of slope is for that pasture. And you can see there that you have a lot of options. So just whichever one most closely relates to the activity and terrain that your animals are in is the one you're going to select. Okay, once you've got all your information put in there for your pasture, you'll click Save when you're finished. Now, if you have multiple pastures, say you are sampling, a couple different pastures at one time, you would just go back and select new pasture again. You would drop another green icon, roughly where that pasture is located, and you would repeat the exact same steps, entering the pasture name, if you have a description, as well as the acres, the size of the pasture, and then, the vegetation cover and activity and terrain for that second pasture. Okay, the next thing we're going to be going over are your animal profiles. Animal profiles allow you to enter specific information about your livestock herd composition, their breed, their age, whether they're cows, bulls, heifers, steers, or calves, and whether they're lactating or pregnant. Each one of these are needed in order to assess how much forage the animal will eat and how to partition the nutrition to maintaining weight, gaining weight, and or milk production. Profiles, again, are designed to be reused, enabling you to track the progress of your animals over time. To provide more accurate results, a profile should be of a single breed type, whether that's male, female, and then if they're castrated or spayed. And their ages should span no more than 12 months apart. So just as an example, if you have a couple different herds and you have a herd of cows, say they're 5 years old, and you have another that's 7 years old, or maybe they're a little younger, they're more like 2 to 3 year olds. We ask that you create a new animal profile for that, just so it can kind of help us once again better understand their nutritional requirements and things of that nature for that age group. In the profile description, you can list information on how to identify the herd. This is information that is not necessary for the lab, but will help you identify your herd. An example of that would be Todd's cows. So if you once again have any herd identifiers, or you call different herds or different groups of animals different things, feel free to enter that information there. And then at the bottom, you'll see we have in red, changes to the entries of a profile will affect all samples, past, present, and future, that are linked to this profile. We'll get into this a little bit more as we go through the logging in and using NUTBAL, but just know that if you create an animal profile for maybe a GAN lab number that you used last year, and then you go back in this year and alter that profile as far as like the breed or the age, things of that nature, it will affect that sample that you used last year. Okay, in order to get to your animal profiles page, we're again working from the middle property tab, and underneath that is animal profiles. So you'll click on animal profiles. And this is the screen that it's going to take you to. So you'll notice here, like we were talking about earlier, if you have any identifiers for your herd, it's an optional box. You don't feel like you have to put anything in there, but if you do have any special identifiers or names or anything like that for your herd, feel free to type those in there, because that will help you or us, depending on whether you're logging your sample in online yourself, or if you're sending in a paper sample sheet for us to log in. This just kind of helps us identify which herd it is that you're talking about. So you'll see your drop down here, your different drop downs below your description box. So you'll go through and you'll have animal kind, the gender of the animal, as well as the breed, number of head, and then the average birth date. And please note that the average birth date of the animals is just that, an average. So for example, if you have, and now this is excluding nursing animals. So if you have calves on cows, don't worry about their birth dates. The ones we're more concerned about are the animals that are actually grazing. And just to kind of give you an example of an average, if you have, cows, maybe running age herd where they're ranging between 5 to 10-year-old cows, you'd want to use a birth date of, something like 7 to 8 years old, just to kind of give us an average of the entire herd. Okay, once you get all your information in there, inputted correctly, you'll click the Save Profile button that's circled here on the slide. And once your profile was saved correctly, successfully, you will see it appear up top here, kind of like how when we went over the kit requests. You'll notice the gray bar and tab kind of moved up above there underneath the blue border there. So if you're inputting an animal profile or you're creating an animal profile for the first time, once it's moved up above here in this top portion of the page, you'll know that it was saved successfully. Okay, the next thing we're going to be going over is entering individual sample info into NUTBAL. All right, the first thing we'll be going over is the sample description page. So you'll notice we're now working from the, at the top we have the three tabs. We're now working from the samples tab, which is located at the far right. And the first drop down below that is descriptions. So you'll click on the sample descriptions there. And that's going to bring you to this page. So the first thing you're going to start with is the stuff that's kind of outlined here. It's located towards the top of the page. It's going to be whether you're, if you're inputting a new sample, you'll select that, as well as the animal kind. Just kind of an FYI, I don't think I've mentioned it thus far, but we can run multiple species of animals. So we generally do cattle. I'd say roughly 90% of the samples that we process here at the lab are cattle samples, but we can run sheep samples, goat samples, horse, elk, and deer samples. So if you are sampling sheep or goats or something of that nature, that the cattle drop down, you would select the species that you're sampling. But if you are sampling cattle, it'll automatically default to that, so you can just leave that as is. The next thing you're going to fill out is the sample date. This is the date that the sample was collected. Okay, after you get your top portion filled out there, your sample date and things, you'll notice these tabs here that are highlighted. You're going to work your way through the tabs. So the first tab that we have here at the far left is the livestock tab. This is where we're actually going to go in and add the animal profiles that we just previously created. So when you're on the livestock tab, you've got your animal profile. So if you have multiple animal profiles that you've created, you can select which one that pertains to this sample. So in this example, we have some female Angus cows with a birth date of April of 2009. The next drop down you'll have is the animal category drop down. That's pretty much going to be for cows. It's going to be mature. If you're working with younger animals, for example, if you're working with some heifers or something, it'll ask you if they're spayed or if they're post-puberty, pre-puberty, that kind of deal. Same thing with male. If you've created a male animal profile, it'll ask you if they're steers or bulls, things of that nature. Okay, the next box we have here is the number of heads. So this is going to be the number of head that are in this animal profile. The next drop down is going to be your frame score. This is going to be, how big or small the frame of the animal is. If you don't know your frame score for a specific breed, generally these default numbers that are in here are going to be pretty close. These here are breed specific, so depending on what breed you use when you created an animal profile, that's kind of the average frame score of that breed. So if you don't have a very good idea, it's okay to just leave the frame score that's automatically generated for you. And the next drop down we have here is the body condition score. This is working, for the Angus breed, which is a beef breed. It's working from the 1 to 9 BCS score. A lot of times the dairy breeds are on a 1 to 5 BCS score, and we'll go over BCS more in depth here in a little bit. But just to kind of give you an idea, you're going to hear in this drop down, you're going to enter the body condition score of the.
Your conference contains less than 3 participants at this time. If you would like to continue, press *1 now, or the conference will be terminated.
Of the animal. Okay, and the next box we have here is our weight. So you're going to list the average weight. Once again, this weight pertains to the average of the herd. So if you have a herd of cows and some of them are more on like the 1100 weight range, but then you have a couple that are up in like maybe the 1300 weight range. This would be kind of like the average of the herd. So you'd want to kind of average them out, just to kind of.
*6 for stop mute.
Just to kind of give you an average of your herd.
Conference lock unlocked. Star 8 to dial out. Pardon the interruption.
So the next boxes we have here are the days lactating and days pregnant boxes. If your animals have just calved, you'll use the drop down for days lactating and tell us approximately how long they've been nursing. If they're still pregnant, you'll use the drop down there under the days pregnant. And then we have the desired daily gain drop down. So this is something that if maybe you have for this herd of animals, you have a desired daily gain that you'd like to see them gain. Maybe you want to see, if your cows are looking a little thin and you would like to see them gain, a pound or so a day. This is where you would enter that desired daily gain. The next two boxes that are highlighted here are the internal and external parasite loads. You'll have different options. You'll have none or low. You'll have moderate, and then you'll have high. So it's kind of just depending on the area that you're in and the time of year. If your animals are experiencing any parasites, whether they're internal or external, you would select those here. And this drop down here is an implant. This is going to be if your animals are implanted. This can be a little confusing because sometimes we'll get sample sheets or people will log in samples and they might have some cows and they're showing that they're implanted, but then they also have some calves with them too. So if the implant is kind of regarding which animals you're sampling from. So if you have cows that aren't implanted, but you have calves that are, you would just leave this at at what it's at right now, like that they're not implanted, because once again it's referring to the cows. But now if you are sampling some steers or heifers or something that are implanted, you would select the implant that would closely resemble the implant that you're using. And lastly, we have a comments box here. So if you have any just general comments about this animal profile, this is where you would type those in. This could be really kind of like our when we were creating our pasture, we had the description box. So just anything that you think is important or pertains to this animal profile that you think you might want us to know, feel free to enter those comments here. Okay, I'm going to go over body condition score a little bit here. You'll see we have three pictures here on this slide. The top one in the left-hand corner is an animal with a body condition score of 8. The middle picture is a body condition score of 5, and the bottom right picture is a BCS of 3. A body condition score in the 1 to 9 system is generally in the range between 85 and 98 pounds. There's different literature out there that will argue one way or the other as far as the actual pounds per BCS score. So we just kind of gave a general pound deal here, and just to show that, just to kind of give you an idea. But generally, anywhere between 85 to 98 pounds is going to be one body condition score. The body condition score is a reflection of past nutrition, and it is critical for goal setting. Okay, entering individual sample information. The effects on nutrition requirement. For age, we have the young versus mature. Gestation, whether they're heavy bred or peak lactation versus open and dry. And then the breeds, the tropical breeds versus your continental European breeds. If you have any questions over body condition scoring, or would like to see any more literature on that, or maybe just learn a little bit more about that, we have a couple different deals here. You'll see the link below on the long version. You'll have the URL link there. It's the longer version, just to kind of go more in depth as far as how body condition scoring works and how to score different animals. And then we have a shorter version. Just to kind of give you an idea of what the 1 to 9 BCS scale looks like, it's shown here in this diagram. So 1 is going to be your animals that are in very poor condition, your very emaciated animals, working up to your 9, which is very obese to the point where they may have trouble walking. You'll see 5 there. A BCS of 5 is kind of the optimal body condition score, and then it either gets better or worse, kind of depending on whether you're going up or down. But this here diagram just kind of gives you a general overview of the 1 to 9 BCS score. Okay, here we've got a couple of pictures, just once again going over some different BCS scores. Here's a cow here with BCS of 4. Here we have an animal with a BCS of 5, BCS of 6, BCS of 7. Okay, if you're wanting to maybe use a little tool in order to calculate BCS or the weight of your animal, under the sample description box, that we've kind of been working from here, you'll see at the top here, this highlighted portion, it says calculation tools. This is a little tool that we've put into NUTBAL that you can use to help determine the BCS score of your animals, and we'll be going over that. So if you click that calculation tools link there, this pop-up will appear, and then you can select the different tools that we have available. So you'll see here that you can select, let me go back a slide. So you can, if you've created an animal profile, you can enter that animal profile. You can select their gender and that sort of nature. And then below it's got the kind of calculate tool. So you can enter like a frame score and a body condition score, and it'll populate that you believe your animals are. You're probably pretty close. But you can also move. You'll see that black dot there that's selected in the weight portion. You can move those around, and if you know the weight, but you don't really have a good idea of what your body condition score is, you can alternate those. So if you have a really good idea of what your animals weigh, maybe you just had them weighed or something of that nature, you can enter the weight, and that'll kind of populate an approximate frame and body condition score for you. So this here is just kind of this exact same box, just with the information in it. So you'll see here that the animal profile that was selected was some female Angus cows, born January of 2010. It's got their age there, and you'll see that with a frame score of 5, and a frame index of 7.3 and a body condition score of 5, the approximate weight for that would be 1,344.9 pounds. Okay, so once you've got your animal information or your animal profile information filled out there, and you like the way it all looks, and it all looks accurate to your herd that you have and that you're sampling, you'll click this Add Profile button, and you'll see this pattern here of this gray bar being moved up to the top here. So after you've clicked on Add Profile, you'll notice that this profile is now moved up to the top underneath this blue header area, and it shows just kind of the generic information, or the information that you just put into your profile. Once again, once you see your profile up here, it was saved successfully. Okay, so next we've got our livestock tab done. We've got our animal profile in there that we sampled, so we're going to be moving on to our pastures tab. So when you click on the pastures tab, this is the the page it's going to take you to. You'll see you have the different drop downs here. You'll select under the pastures drop down. You'll select the pasture that this animal profile and this sample was taken from. You'll also have the ability to select the pasture growth rate. You'll see here that you've got a couple of different options. So depending on the time of year or the amount of rainfall that you've had recently, you're going to select the one that most closely applies to your situation in that pasture. So you've got declining, dormant, or drought. This is going to be obviously if you're in a drought-like conditions, or if it's fall or you're starting to get that winter weather. This is going to be the pasture growth rate that you're going to select. Springtime, flowering and seeding, so you've got the green grass starting to come up, and you're starting to see some flowering and seeding. And then you have rapid growth. So whichever one most closely applies to the time of year or when the sample is taken, that's the one you're going to select. If you've used any ionophores, you can select that there, as well as the days in grazing period. Also, I just want to go back real quick. You'll see where this green arrow, this green box arrow is pointing. There's a comments box here as well underneath the Pastures tab. So this here we use quite a bit when we're logging in, and we always encourage people who are logging in their own samples to use it as well. This is kind of just overall general comments for the entire sample. So it doesn't necessarily have to just be for the pasture information. It could be for anything. So any notes that you might have for us that you think are important, you know, for whether it's in regards to your animal information or the pasture information, or maybe it's, you know, weather conditions that you've experienced recently, feel free to use this box. It does have a character limit, but you do have quite a bit of space in there to type a couple of pretty good sentences. So we do try to encourage people to use this just so it kind of helps us understand the, you know, either the environmental, you know, factors and things that were going on when the sample was taken, as well as anything that was going on with your animals. Okay, so the next tab we're going to be working from is the Feeds tab, which is located just to the right of the Pastures tab. Okay, entering information on supplemental feeds. Only the Livestock tab, just this is kind of an overall, only the Livestock tab and the Pastures tabs have to be filled out in order to successfully save the sample description. If supplemental feeds are being used, add information for each feed being used. You'll click Add Feed after each feed is added. We will go over that here in a second whenever we are actually looking at the page. Only include supplemental feeds that were being fed prior to sampling and that will continue to be fed over the next 30 days. Feeds need to be discontinued 48 hours before sampling. Once again, I kind of touched on that briefly, but you know, we're going to go back over that. So it's not, if it's not practical, or you know, from a management point of view, if you are unable to pull your animals off of feed 48 hours prior to sampling, you know, that's perfectly okay. But the reason why we ask you to do so is if you're, you know, as I said kind of in the beginning of my portion here, if you're really just trying to get a good idea of the forage quality that they're grazing, this is why you would pull your animals off of any supplemental feed. Okay, what feed to enter? Supplements with protein should always be entered here. If unsure about what to enter, send a copy of your feed tag in with your sample, and we will assist you in getting that put in there correctly. Vitamin and mineral supplements do not need to be entered in the NUTBAL. What feeds to enter? Hay or roughage supplements are unique. It is important that the lab be made aware that hay is being fed if you are feeding hay. But we do recommend that hay not be entered into the system as a feed. It is best to leave a note in the sample description or in the comments box that I was talking about earlier. So if you're feeding a hay, that's where we ask that you write that. If you are feeding hay and do not remove the hay 48 hours before taking your sample, then the diet quality as measured in the manure will include the contribution of the hay to the overall forage quality. So this is kind of another important reason on why, if you are feeding hay and you don't take them off, just to leave it in the comments box. That way, whenever we scan your sample, we won't double count for your hay. Just kind of an example of that is if you're supplementing hay and your animals are also grazing a little bit out in pasture, if you do add that hay into your sample, it would essentially be counting that that forage twice or that roughage twice. So that's why we ask that you just leave us a little note and tell us. That way, we won't add that hay, but we're aware that you're feeding it, just so it will kind of give you an idea of what what the forage quality is actually like, rather than the combination of hay and the forage. Okay, we recommend that you do not take your animals off of hay to get a sample. Once again, this is just something that you're going to, make a note of, or leave a note on your handwritten sample sheet telling us that you're also supplementing hay, because the NIRS will give you an assessment of pasture and hay quality. If you desire to assess the pasture forage only, you can remove hay from the animals 48 hours prior to sample collection, if this is possible. Again, if it's not practical for you to remove, the hay or supplemental feed, don't worry about doing so. Okay, so this is kind of what the feeds tab or feeds page looks like. You'll see we've got a couple of different drop-down boxes and things here. So underneath the feed, you're going to select the feed type, whether you're feeding cubes or you've got a protein tub or cake or distillers grain, anything like that. There's a pretty significant amount of feeds that are available there for you to choose. Below that, we've got the crude protein percentage. So if you know the protein percentage that's in the supplemental feed that you're providing, you can enter that information here, as well as the TDN, the total digestible nutrients. The cost per ton for the feed, you'll enter that there, as well as below that the amount fed. So if you're feeding, if you're feeding a pretty exact amount, you can enter that here. Also, you'll notice to the right of the amount fed, we have the frequency of feeding. So if you're supplementing and you're feeding that supplement daily or every 2 days or every 3 days or on a weekly basis, you can enter that information here. Once you have all your feed information inputted correctly and you've got your amount fed in there and your the frequency of feeding, you'll click the Add Feed button. And kind of going back to seeing that information moved up to the top. Once again, that's a good thing. That's what you want to see. That's the way you know that your information was inputted correctly and saved. Here, just as an example, we have 20% cubes. You can see that they're feeding at a rate of 1.5 pounds daily, and it's underneath that blue header. So that's where you want to see it to know that it was inputted correctly. Okay, after you've got all your information put in there, again, if you're not supplementing any feeds, don't worry about this feeds tab. You don't have to have a feed entered in order to save the description and create a sample number. But if you are supplementing a concentrate, we ask that you add that. And then if you're supplementing hay, we ask that you leave us a note either in the comments box if you're logging that in online yourself, or if you're sending in a paper sample sheet, to please just note that on the sample sheet in the comments box. So we can be made aware of that. But once your information is all in there and you've got your livestock, your pasture, and feeds tab where they need to be, you'll click Save Description at the top. And you'll notice that you will have a sample number here. Each sample has its own unique GANLab sample number. So for this sample that we are using as kind of just kind of as an example, the sample number is 57257. After you get your sample number, you can click Close on this pop-up box. And if you created a number online and you logged your sample in online yourself, you have the option here to print out this sample sheet. Once again, all the information that you see on this sample sheet is all the stuff that you entered between your animal profile, your pasture information, and if you added any feed information. So from this page here, you can print that, or if you would like this emailed to you, you can do that as well. Okay, the next thing we're going to go over is filling out paper sample sheets. Now this is the paper sample sheet I was kind of talking about a little bit earlier. This is going to come with your information packet that we send in with your kits that come in a manila folder. The first 2 pages that are stapled on top are just going to kind of be an overview of the GANLab and sampling and different instructions and things of that nature. And then behind that is going to be 6 of these paper sample sheets. So if you're not very tech savvy or you're not very comfortable working on a computer and inputting the information online, this is the paper sample sheet that you would fill out by hand and send to us for us to add this information into your sample. So you'll see the box that's highlighted right now is the client information. This is essentially what the contact details were that we went over earlier. So it's going to be just your first and last name, the address, if you have an email address, and then you'll notice down there at the bottom of this box we have the preferred contact method. So if you would like us to contact you for any reason or send your reports via email, or if you would like those mailed or faxed, you can select that here. Generally, the only thing we use this for is, if we have a question about your sample or something of that nature, or we also use this to see how you would like your report sent. So if you send us a paper sample sheet, but maybe you want your reports emailed to you so you can get them a little bit quicker, you can select email here. The next highlighted box is the ranch information. So you'll write the name of your ranch or farm, as well as the address and city and state of that, if it's different than your contact information. Okay, the box that's highlighted right now is if you're a part of the Conservation Stewardship Program or the CSP program, if you have an NRCS agent or a technical advisor, we ask that you put their name and email address here so that we can note that. Next, we have the select service. So we have two different services that we offer when it comes to the reports and what we send you guys. We have the standard report, which is kind of just a standard report, and it's a $35 report. It's going to include the NIRS report as well as the animal performance report on what we predict the animal to do over the next 30 days, whether we think they're going to maintain their weight or gain weight or lose weight. Based off of the predictions that we get in our NIRS machine. So that's just going to kind of be your standard report. The other service that we offer is the advisory report. It's a $70 report. It's going to include the NIRS report as well as sample or feed recommendations. So if, for example, you have a desired daily gain of, say, 1 pound, and after we scan your sample and look at the protein and energy values of the forage that your animals were consuming, if we don't think that, from our predictions, that they're meeting that weight gain or that weight goal that you have set for them, we can help you make feed recommendations to meet those daily gains in order to reach a body condition score or a weight. Once again, that's something we try to work with you with. So if you have maybe a feed in mind that you've been thinking about starting to supplement, but you haven't started yet, or maybe you are thinking about ordering some feed or something, we can help you make decisions on what type of feed you might want to supplement to reach your goals, as well as at what rate to feed those feeds. So here in this highlighted box, you've got the program box. So if you are part of the CSP program, you can select that. If you are using NUTBAL or the GAN Lab for maybe research or something education related, you can select that. But if you're just using it for general management practices and you're just trying to kind of see a trend of your forage quality in your pastures throughout the different times of year, you can select other or none and just tell us what, if it's just for management, you can select none. The date collected box is going to be the date that the sample was collected. Okay, this highlighted section here is your kind of pertinent to the animal attributes and things of the herd that or the animals that you're sampling. So you've got your herd ID. So earlier we used the example of Todd's cow. So if you have specific identifying names or numbers or things for different herds, you can enter that here, as well as the species, the gender and breed. You'll see there in parentheses, as well as average age. Those are all required fields. Those are the things that we need to generate a NUTBAL report. So we ask that you give us that information. You'll see there also it's got the number of head. And then below that, you'll see the optional breed information. So this example that we have here on the sheet for you is some Angus cows, and you'll see they're 100% British or continental breed. But if you are sampling maybe a tropical breed or something and you want to give us some optional breed information if they're crossed with something or something of that nature, you can provide that information there. Okay, the next highlighted area here is the current condition of the animal. So the top one, if they're spayed or castrated, you can tell us yes or no. The body condition score, the weight of the animal, whether they're lactating or pregnant. You'll also notice that these are required fields due to, whether if they are pregnant or lactating, this is going to change the nutritional requirement for the animals. So this is why we ask that you give us this information if this applies. Also, down below that, you'll see the desired average daily gain. So if you do have a weight gain goal or maybe even a weight loss goal, for your animals, you can provide that here, as well as whether they're implanted or not, and then if they have any internal or external parasites. Okay, and then down here at the bottom, the highlighted area is going over your pasture information. So you'll give us the name of your pasture, as well as the size in acres of the pasture that you sampled from, and kind of going over the exact same information that we are logging in online before. The amount of forage, the percentage of forage you are allowing to be grazed or depleted, as well as the predominant forage type, whether that's native, intermediate, short, tall. It could be an annual grain, it could be, a cover crop or something of that nature. That's where you would write that. Also, whether it's adequately or poorly watered, and then the degree of slope. So if it's less than or equal to 15% slope, if you would tell us there, but if it's greater, if you're, in more of a mountainous area or things of that nature, you would probably be in the greater than 15% slope. And then below that, we have the pasture growth rate, whether it's low, medium, or high. We have ionophores if you're using an ionophore. And then you have the days in grazing period and their percentage of unrestricted grazing. So moving kind of to the top right of the sample sheet, we have the feed sec portion here. If you're supplementing any feeds, we ask that you put those in here. As well as, along with the feed type, the percentage of crude protein, the total digestible nutrients, as well as the cost per ton and the amount fed. And again, this is on a per pound per head basis here on the sample sheet. So, if you've got 30 head and you're feeding, just kind of a bulk feed and you're out there putting it out, this is going to be what what per head is eating in a pound, in the poundage rate per day. So, you'd want to give us, the per head per pound basis, as well as the frequency of feeding. So if you're feeding daily or every 2 days, every 3 days, or weekly, if you would note that on here. And then down here at the bottom, you see the feed mitigation. So the minimum and max fed. So if you're feeding something, a type of feed, and the recommended amount is, saying don't feed any less than this, but also don't feed any more because it could cause problems. That's where you have the option to list that if you have any feed mitigations. And I'm going to go back real quick. You'll see here we have the two different comments boxes. You have one for your pasture. So if you have any pasture notes there, please, just in general for us, whether it's weather conditions or maybe you've got a cover crop or something and you want to tell us what that is, or if it's a combination of different grasses and things, you have the option to list that there. And then we have the larger just comments box. So if you're supplementing hay or you're providing hay, this is where you would write in this comments box that you're supplementing hay, and then you could tell us what type of hay and at what rate you're feeding it, or how much you're feeding and how often you're feeding it. As well as any other general comments. So if you're providing maybe a salt and mineral block or a salt and mineral supplement or something of that nature, we like to see those comments there, or just any general comment that's pertaining to your sample, or the forage quality when your sample is taken. We do appreciate those comments because it kind of helps us get a better picture in our heads when we're logging in this information on what the animals were consuming, or what the weather conditions and things were like. Okay, next we're going to go over lab processing and NIR. So just to kind of flow from the top, working our way from